Hi, I'm Alan on this video. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to more Drop or Dash. We are back with tradition. EVW has announced his next hardest demon, which is Yatagarasu, yet another level that I've completed myself. And as we do over here, we're going to be going through Yatagarasu. I'm going to be speaking you guys through it a little bit, and I'm going to be teaching you the best ways to go about it. We did it with Bloodbath, we did it with Phobos, we did it with Artificial Ascent. Did I do it with Artificial Ascent? I think so. We did it with Digital Ascent, we did it with Subsonic, and now we are doing it with Yata, and I'm very excited for it. It's going to be very, very fun. It's going to be very exciting. I love this level. I think this is absolutely one of my favorite levels of all time. It's such a cool level, and I have a lot of things to say about it. I will be speaking a little bit about other things as well, because Yatagarasu, I think, is like the point where the way you approach levels practice-wise becomes much more important. And what I mean by that is that normally you just do some runs, figure stuff out, right, and just call it a day. This level, I feel like, is the turning point where you have to be a little bit more meticulous about how you actually practice so that you don't get stuck on it for way too long. The reason why some people are very capable of beating stuff very, very quickly is because of the way that they force practice, and I think Yata is a very good starting point for that style of practice. You can obviously use it in different ways as well. However, I will be teaching you Yatagarasu with the idea that you are practicing in a certain way to gain consistency. Because as Eric said in his video, this level is very much a consistency test. It is 3 minutes of brutal timings, ship, and everything, and it's all a matter of how consistent you can get. So without further ado, let's hop into it, and I will teach you guys a little bit about it. So in this very beginning, it's very straightforward, very easy. Viper's part is just kind of like there to just like throw you off a little bit, I think. It's not a very hard part, but it's a part that you can very easily die to. And then you get into Erebus, and this is where a lot of attempts just die in the very beginning. You're gonna, it's just a part that you just die to a lot as you just start getting into the level itself, right? The first jump, very weird, very awkward, and there's just a lot of like small things. Like as you mentioned, this micro click is not exactly fun, and you're 100% right. But for the most part, Anubis' part is very straightforward. It's just an easy one to just like fail to begin with, right? It's definitely a part that I would just like sit down and just play a lot, just because you need to get it into your muscle memory, right? This is just a part that you need to get into your muscle memory. You get very good at it, but it's just a part that you need to practice. Then we get into Jazor's part, which isn't too bad. The thing about Jazor's part that is a little bit tricky is that it looks like you have way less space than you really do. You have a lot of space, so you have to think about using a lot bigger strokes, right? If I can get this first click down, you hold a lot in this part just because it's not as tight as it would look. Jazor's part, I think, is a very good example of it's much easier than it actually looks. It's just that because of the way you look at it, and especially back in the day when we didn't have hitbox, show hitbox on death, it was very hard to actually see where the hitboxes were and how much space you actually have. So don't overthink this part. Just use the space that you have because there's a lot of it. And as for this right here, I will show in speed hack real fast. As you can see here, massive amounts of space. Skip this yellow portal. This is the easiest input of all time. This skip is actually so unbelievably easy to do, and it saves you from having to do like a funky release timing for this blue portal. Skip this yellow portal. It does nothing, and it's such an easy skip to do. If you don't want to do skips, go for it. But it makes this part so much more consistent, I find. So just do that, okay? Just do that. And Woogie's part is where I believe that we have to start talking about how you want to practice this. Practice Woogie by playing from Jazor. Practice getting into Woogie, practice playing Woogie from earlier in the level. That's not from zero. Because getting here takes 15-20 seconds almost. It's a very long part, right? So just practice getting into Woogie from there. Approach that with every single part that you play. Don't just play a part, get decent at it, and call it a day. Practice the part from earlier in the level so you don't get there every single attempt. The reason why you want to do this is because a lot of the time, small things like getting into the part itself can mess up how you play it. I've been noticing that a lot with the level that I'm currently playing, where playing from the part is very easy, but as soon as I move back a little bit, getting into that same rhythm as I am while practicing from the part is very much harder when I'm practicing from 10-15% earlier on in the level. Very important. Other thing that Woogie is very important for is that this is where ship parts become so hard that you need to drill in the click patterns for the ship to the point where you never do anything else. You have to play it well enough and get consistent enough to where you can react if you mess up, but play and hard send one specific click pattern. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself dying a lot to the ship, especially early on in the level where the ship parts are really, really difficult and very, very tight. If you don't have a very set amount of inputs that you do per ship part, you're going to have a very hard time simply because of the fact that it's very hard to readjust in these parts. So just hard send a click pattern for it. So what I did in the ship, I did 1 to go up into the yellow portal, tap twice, and then just hold as I enter the invisible blue portal, just release, and then 1 more click. That is the hard-coded click pattern that I have for that part, because that is a very consistent way for me to always do that part. Otherwise, that ship part is really hard. There's a lot of momentum, there's a lot of movement to it. Just hard send 1 click pattern and do that for every single ship part. Otherwise, it's just gonna be hard. Treat ship the same way you would treat wave or anything else. Set amount of clicks, always do the same click pattern. Just hard send that. It will make everything infinitely more consistent, and it's just a good way to just get better overall. It will make a lot of very hard ship parts feel a lot easier than they really are. As you can see, very consistent, very simple, very easy. Same with this part right here. There's 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, like that. I recommend landing on this corner. Go back here. Landing on this corner makes these 2 clicks buffers. Otherwise, you have to like time them in like a weird way. So I would just like try and get into the habit of landing on this corner. Same with that part. I just go 1, 2, 3, and then a little bit of a hold. Passes it pretty much every single time. Another hard ship that is very easy once you like get into like a very good click pattern for it. You don't really necessarily have to copy my click pattern for it, but find your own click pattern and then just hard send it. Find whatever you find the most comfortable. Count your clicks. Spend a lot of time with it, and then just don't stray away from that as much as humanly possible. And then we get into the drop. This cube is a little bit weird, but it's just one of those parts that you just kind of get used to. Here, what I do is for the strafe, I go 1, 2, 3, 4. The 4th click is obviously here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Simple wave that I can do. There we go. This is just another part that you just kind of like have to brute force consistency with. A lot of people, myself including, would recommend that 21 to 100 is a decent run that you should be able to do. Simply because it's just, at the very beginning at least, you're not going to be getting to the drop very frequently. So just get really good at 21 to 100. Same goes for here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. This wave is pretty simple. You just 1, 2, and then click here. So you go 1, 2. So you go into the blue portal and then you just go straight up. Yata is very much a consistency test. So you just want to find click patterns that for you work and are consistent. This trip part is pretty easy just because you have a very consistent setup because you land on this block. So you can just like do it the same way every time. Right? So just again, create a click pattern for it. Hard send that click pattern. Don't deviate from it. You have a 100% consistent setup landing on that platform. So it's a very easy thing to just like do the same way every single time. And it makes you so consistent with the part to the point where you won't really make mistakes here. Very rarely will you actually fail this part. As for this part, I actually find this part pretty hard because I'm just not a fast clicker. What I would do here is when you get into here, tap 1, 2, and then 1, 2 really fast. So you jump from that and then you just do 1, 2, 1, 2, like that. I find that to be the most consistent because there's no like hold releases and all that stuff, and it makes it a very consistent setup. Now, here is where you have to make a little bit of a choice. You can and you cannot hit this green orb. You can choose to hit it, you can choose to not hit it. The advantage of hitting it is that you have a very consistent setup for this first straight fly where you just don't have a lot of movement because you just kind of like, you're just kind of like stopped. You have a very consistent setup like that, right? Con is that you will have to do this gravity switch, which is pretty hard, right? It's pretty difficult. But you can also just, which makes it so that you can just skip the yellow portal, which makes the last stray fly much easier, right? Very much depends on how you want to play it yourself. I did it with the green orb, I'm pretty sure. It's just a thing for comfort, right? If you want to do the green orb, you do the green orb. If you don't want to do the green orb, you don't do the green orb. It's that simple. Cosine's ball part is odd. It's much harder than it looks. And that's just because it looks like you have so much room, but you really don't. That's just the part that you have to get used to. Same with Vermilion's part. This is just another case of just count your clicks so you get a consistent setup. I go 1, 2, and then just click in the portals just so you can like consistently do it the exact same way every time. And then this ball part, again, it's just a consistency thing. The ball parts are pretty easy. You will get them down eventually. They're a little bit tough to begin with because they are pretty tight. This part, very easy. That wave part is just really easy. You can die to it. I died to it once, I think, which is very frustrating, but you know, it's whatever. Then you get into Michigan's part. Michigan's part is just jump way earlier than you think. Like, that's just how Michigan's part is in this level, I feel like. You just kind of like jump much earlier than you would think you do. As for this wave transition, pay attention to when you pass this spike. I do my click when I'm like in a parallel with this spike, just so that you can just time this, right? So you go like that. You do the 1, 2. It's a very hard transition, but it gets very consistent once you like know how to do it properly. Once you have like a good visual cue for it, it becomes incredibly consistent. As for this jump, it's not a bug. The bird just kills you. It's just an invisible triple spike, basically. And a very hard one at that. You have to jump insanely late for this jump. You just jump as late as you possibly can, basically. Go like halfway off the edge and then jump, and then you should be fine. Now, Luneth's part is very easy. However, I think this is one of the absolute scariest parts, because the entire purpose of this part is to just build as many nerves as possible, so you're as nervous as you possibly can as you start entering the hardest parts of the ending. Like, this part is just straight up easy, right? It's a very easy part, but it's there to build nerves as you enter Heinz. And Heinz's part is, yet again, similar to Woogie's part, hard send a click pattern. The swing copter is not too bad, but you have to find a click pattern to where you find that ship comfortable. Because if you try and like do the ship differently every time, you're gonna be screwed over. So just hard send a click pattern that you really find comfortable with that ship, and it becomes super easy. Although you're probably going to be shitting yourself as you get here, because to be fair, this is like one of the scariest parts of the entire level. Like, getting here is just like, okay, I have a shot at getting to the end if I just don't throw. I think 60 to 100 is a very hard part of this level, and it's all because it's just so much nerve control. And especially after Luneth's part, which was the previous one, it just becomes scary. Same with Evasion's part. This is just another part that I would just like recommend just get a click pattern for it. Like, that's just what you have to realize with this level, is that this level is such a massive challenge when it comes to just like being consistent with ship, especially. Like, Evasion's part looks really easy, and it's a part that very many people just kind of just don't think about, but then they die to it because they don't have a click pattern. They're just playing it as if they're sight reading it, and that's a really bad idea. 2.5 minutes in, or 2 minutes in to a 3-minute level, that is really hard, right? So even if the part seems easy, find a click pattern for it, okay? Just whatever you're comfortable with, really. And here comes the hardest stretch of the level, in my opinion. Lugia and CSX, I would argue, are probably the 2 hardest parts of the level. I think these parts are like really tough, and especially with the nerves, very hard. This part right here is a very tight gap. Whether or not you want to do like a recorrectional, like 2 taps here, or just want to do 1, go for whatever you want to. But this is a tight gap. This is an extremely tight gap. Do not underestimate this gap whatsoever. That's what a lot of people do. Use the kind of like a lack of block here to just like readjust themselves, like right here, right? Probably the best thing to do. However, you are playing on a Razor Basilisk, and a tiny click on a Razor Basilisk is not exactly easy. So take that advice with a little bit of a grain of salt. Do whatever you find most comfortable for yourself, but that also makes the timing like significantly harder. Now, this timing right here, like this little wave time right here, is another case of just like know exactly how many times you have to click. You can just go 3 times, 1, 2, 3, like that. I think that's probably the most consistent way of doing it, but you're also running into the risk of just like randomly hitting a spike. But you just need to be on like a downward trajectory pretty early on, just to like get down like properly, right? And then this part is just, this is just nerve control, but it's very hard nerve control. Like, this part is so easy to die to. It's kind of unreasonable to just expect not to die here, even if it's not the hardest part of all time. Like, these parts are completely different when you're just like really nervous, right? These ball clicks are just stupid. They're just bad. And fighting this part is terrifying, but this is just another part where you just like count. I go 1, 2, 3, so I'm like high up into the portal. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. That, and it's just a matter of learning. Like, funniest part, I don't really have anything like I have nothing to truly just suggest with this part. It's just a part that you need to just get good at, right? It's very tricky, it's very hard. Like, I would argue it's just difficult. This ball part, thankfully, is pretty simple, pretty shrimple. The only really like hard clicks in this ball part is this click right here, so you can very easily just go late or go early. I had to time in between those. And that click. This click right here, you can't see it anymore. But that click, pretty hard. For this part, Riot's part is just, as he said, it's just nerve control test. I would recommend jumping after that, just because I find it terrifying to just jump and then wait with the next jump. Because I find it personally easier to time stuff if I don't have a lot, if I have like a click like very early after it, because at that point it just becomes like a rhythm. right? Don't jump too late over this triple spike. That is all. If you jump too late over this triple spike, you will land to the point where you cannot do this. You will hit this spike on the side. My buddy Leah died to that. Very sad. Jump early, because if you try and time it, that happens. I would personally recommend just doing 4 clicks and then holding. If you find that method easier, then go for it. I don't know why you would want to do that though, because it seems much harder to me personally. That's it. That's Yatagarasu. Very cool level, very awesome. I really love it, and I really hope that you have fun with it. I think this is fantastic. It is one of my all-time favorites, and as I did it as a hardest, it was such an insane journey. But again, focus on the things that I talked about in this video, especially with how you practice ship parts and how you practice each individual section. Playing from Heinz is really easy. Passing Heinz from before Michigan is really hard. So if you want to get like really good at stuff like Heinz, practice from Michigan with the intent of passing Heinz. That's the way that I practice a lot of stuff. Like with the level I'm playing right now, I don't have too much of an issue with 74 to 100, but as soon as I move back to 64 or 48, 74 to 100 becomes really, really difficult. Practice with the intent of playing the parts that are much later in the level, but from an earlier point. And of course, as I said, repeat after me, hard send ship click patterns. It's very important, especially with this level. Anyway, thank you for watching. Good luck, Eric, with Yatagarasu. I'm super excited to watch the streams. Take care, everyone. Love you all. Eat your greens, stay healthy, stay hydrated. Thank you for making my day better. Hoping yours a little bit better too. Peace out, everyone.